Obama promises not to drag us into another ground war in Iraq. But wait, I'm confused. Haven't we been at war since 2003? Everyone seems to be beating the war drum lately, as if we haven't been at war in the Middle East for over a decade. Today, we're taking on the crisis against the group known as ISIS. Alex in the command center, take it away.
Governor, a new NBC News / Wall Street Journal and Annenberg poll found that 70% of Americans say they lack the confidence that the U.S. government will achieve its goals in fighting the terrorist group ISIS. But at the same time, the poll found that still 62% of voters say they support Obama's decision to take action against ISIS in Iraq and Syria, while only 22% oppose it. Some odd numbers, Governor. They don't have the confidence in our government, but they still support intervention?
Well, you know what they're actually learning? They're learning that as soon as we destroy ISIS, it's going to rear its head again under another name, and then we'll have to fight there. So this is the culture we got to break away from, is people believing, 60% believe that we should always be at perennial war. Maybe now I should be starting to calling us the United States of Rome, because we are following the Roman Empire to a T. And the Roman Empire fell, and if we continue down this path, Jesse Ventura is predicting the United States will fall also.
What does this tell you about the state of mind of Americans right now?
They've fallen for this thing of being scared. The media and the government has scared the people of the United States into thinking the next stop for ISIS will be a Normandy invasion in Virginia. Of course, they would counter and say, no, they're going to sneak in here, and they're going to attack us that way. We got plenty of criminal elements in this country already. You don't see us walling off the country to stop Italians from coming here and being part of the mafia, do ya? You don't see us walling off the country and stopping bikers from joining the Hells Angels, do ya? Those are two groups that cause a lot of trouble here. ISIS is no different. It's just that they happen to be Muslim and they happen to be from the Middle East. So that terrifies us more than Christian criminals do. Maybe if we'd get out of the Middle East and get out of there completely, like bin Laden said, you don't see us attacking Norway, do you?
Well, these poll numbers were released following Obama's speech last week, where he said, American military power is unmatched, but this can't be America's fight alone. And he promised the American people, we will not get dragged into another ground war in Iraq. But our troops are needed to support Iraqi and Kurdish forces with training, intelligence, and equipment. Governor, what do you make of the president's comments? Does it sound like he's still going to war?
You're not going to beat ISIS and somehow make everything right over there. You're still going to be hated. None of this would have happened had we not gone over there and destabilized it. So here's who we have to thank for all of this mess today: George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. Two guys who were too chicken to go to Vietnam, too chicken to join the service and stand up and fight for their country, but they took us over there. If Barack Obama says we need to get involved, and if we end up with boots on the ground, I said this before, the first two pairs of boots that ought to be on the ground over there are George Bush and Dick Cheney leading from the front and not the rear.
Well, Governor, when does war as a term apply to U.S. foreign policy, and who designates it?
War is supposed to be voted on by the Congress. You're supposed to go in front of Congress and do a declaration of war and explain why, who, and how, and who you're fighting. But it seems we've lost that in the last decades. We're so used to war, and we're such a warlike culture now, we don't even need clearance. When we finish with this war, you can bet we'll have another one waiting in the wings.
Well, there may be support at home, but abroad it seems to be a different story. According to CNN, the United States has conducted more than 150 airstrikes in Iraq against ISIS, and Secretary of State John Kerry has said nearly 40 nations have agreed to contribute to the fight against the militants. But it remains unclear which countries are on that list and the role they'll play. And it seems many of America's Arab allies are reluctant to show support, so reads one recent New York Times headline.
And why are they reluctant to show support? Because it's religion. We are a predominant Christian nation. They are predominantly Muslim nations. and you're not going to convince them that it isn't the Christians trying to kill the Muslims, regardless of who the Muslims are. Get rid of religion, you get rid of war for the most part. Maybe it's time we allow them to form their own countries without Western intervention. But then, of course, that's impossible because we have something called oil companies.
Well, ISIS is intensifying fears with the release of their latest video, in which they beheaded another Westerner, a British aid worker named David Haynes. This was the third videotaped killing released in less than a month. What do you make of these beheadings, Governor? It's hard for our governments to ignore these threats.
Exactly, but what did our guests tell us? They're trapping us. It's done to get us to come over there. Our policy is not really stopping terrorism. Our policy's creating terrorists. I think we're doing it on purpose so we have someone to fight to keep the military-industrial war machine getting its money, because they're the ones that control our politicians. That's why we're at perennial war all the time.
Well, the mother of the slain American journalist, who was also beheaded by the extremist group, said that the U.S. government threatened her family with prosecution should they raise money to pay her son's ransom. Diane Foley told ABC News this past week, "I was surprised there was so little compassion. It just made me realize that these people talking to us had no idea what it was like to be the family of someone abducted." I'm sure the U.S. official didn't mean it the way he said it.
Wait a minute, Alex, wait a minute. You're telling me that they were trying to raise money to pay off the ransom to get their loved one out of there and released, and the U.S. government didn't help them?
They said she would be prosecuted for doing so.
She'd be prosecuted? That, I rest my case. This is all a setup, and we're falling for it again. Maybe they wanted his head cut off, didn't they? So they could have an excuse to go in there, didn't they? Sounds to me like he was a sacrificial lamb on our side.
Well, the White House is denying that they made these threats, but states they made clear what the law is. Under U.S. law, Governor, it is illegal to pay ransoms to such organizations since it is thought to financially support terrorism and encourage more kidnappings.
So here's another prime example of the government passing laws that we have to abide by, but it doesn't apply to them. Another hypocritical double standard in law in America.
Well, we can't talk about Iraq without bringing up Dick Cheney, the former vice president.
Oh, gosh.
I know you're excited for this one. The former vice president, in a pre-buttal to Obama's speech on ISIS, stated this: "We should immediately hit them in their sanctuaries, staging areas, command centers, and lines of communication wherever we find them. Phasing in our actions will not suffice. Such a strategy will only prolong the conflict and increase the casualties." Cheney told the audience at the American Enterprise Institute, a conservative think tank. "We are at war," he said, "and we must do whatever it takes for as long as it takes to win."
That's the reason Cheney wants to go to war, you know. He owns tons of stock in Halliburton, and the more we're at war, the more money Dick Cheney makes.
And Governor, what do you make of all this news regarding Iraq following the 13th anniversary of 9/11?
It's been proven Iraq had nothing whatsoever to do with 9/11. You cannot question Iraq without questioning what got us there. Why will no one investigate or question 9/11 or believe you were lied to on that day too? It's amazing. They'll question the war in Iraq, but nobody except Jesse Ventura and a few other people will question 9/11 right along with it.